The future of unemployed daily news staff remains uncertain tonight, with the negotiations to restart the paper having stalled. The Perth man is aiming to have the paper up and running again by mid-June.
It was more than 7 months ago the last daily rolled off the presses. Today, after numerous bids for the paper, one buyer remains interested, HMR Engine Limited, headed by Ron Lindsay. But Mr Lindsay believes he's been discouraged from restarting the afternoon tabloid.
We have never changed our stance that we are ready, willing and able to settle up the purchase of the masthead.
Last December, Mr Lindsay agreed to buy the paper's masthead from liquidator Ross Norgard for $300,000. But that agreement stalled after Mr Lindsay failed to meet a deadline and he was offered his deposit back.
Now, that deposit was a $30,000 non-refundable deposit. Why would anyone do that?
In his latest offer, Mr Lindsay has agreed to stop legal action blocking the paper's sale to anyone else if his original bid is reconsidered. But it seems a lack of communication is threatening the June 19th deadline. Mr Norgard says he has no knowledge of the latest offer. In the meantime, hundreds of former Daily News staff, many still unemployed, continue to face an uncertain future.
To the program. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, a piece of Western Australian history and 200 jobs simply disappeared. After more than 100 years, Perth's evening newspaper, the Daily News, followed other evening newspapers into oblivion. Many are saying the closure just didn't need to happen. In a moment, we'll find out why it did from Bob Baxt, head of the Trade Practices Commission. But first, Miriam Borthwick shared the Daily's last day with those most affected.
Whether this was the end, the final print run for the Daily News, was today's question.
If it goes into liquidation, it's quite on the cards that we could lose weeks' wages, annual leave, long service leave, and anybody with extended length of service could leave service pay.
For 30 years, he's been a printer. Today's front page was the gloomiest ever produced, a scathing criticism of the Trade Practices Commission by the editor. Inside the Daily, work continued, and the Daily continued to lose money. It's been doing so since it left the wing of the West in 1987. Today, the media lined up to catch the owner, Brian Coppin, and the workers waited too. But no one spoke, other than the AJA.
The decision that the Commission made, an interim decision last time when the West wanted the community newspapers and the Daily News together, the interim decision said, yes, you can have the Daily News, but you can't have the community newspapers with the suburban titles. Now, obviously, something in their mind has changed to reverse that decision.
What? I mean, are they under a political agenda?
I think maybe, the approaches that they've had, they're believing in the hope that, yes, there'll be another viable player like Heytesbury Holdings come in and start a new newspaper. But we've heard those utterances from Heytesbury for a very long time.
And as the journalists left for the Trade Practices Commission, they were going to hear that again.
There is another very important factor that we have to take into account, one which we spend some time on in discussing in this decision. Notwithstanding what the board of the Daily News might think of the counter-offer that was made by Heytesbury Holdings, it is our view that that offer should have been pursued, negotiated with, in the context of the duties that face the directors of the Daily News in dealing with the situation where the only other purchaser would have created a monopoly which, absent authorisation, would have amounted to a breach of the law.
The decision to disallow the West to buy the Daily because of the creation of a monopoly seemed farcical. Without the Daily, a monopoly's left.
Well, it's a monopoly that might occur as a result of other events, but not through the acquisition. The law says, just a moment now, look, I know that you will think that this is humorous.
We don't think it's humorous. I've got children in the house, what are we supposed to do?
What I'm saying to you is I know that you'll think that what I'm saying to you is humorous in the sense that, that here we are putting to you a proposition that is ridiculous, because if the newspaper closes, there'll only be one newspaper in the state.
That, they say, is the law. And they say that Heytesbury Holdings will probably open a newspaper within the next 6 months. But the journalists weren't convinced.
What sort of guarantee have you got?
I can't give you any guarantee that you can sue on.
There is no guarantee. It's a furphy.
Well, that's your assessment of it.
I heard Mr Treadgold at the hearing, Professor Baxt. You weren't there.
The last word of the Trade Practices Commission was that there was going to be a staff meeting back here at the Daily News at 3 o'clock. And that's what's happening now. The management have said that they really want the staff to be the first to hear what happens at the Daily, but soon we'll know whether the Daily News is actually closing down today or not. What's the outcome?
The outcome is that, unfortunately, as a result of the TPC decision, the Daily News has been placed in provisional liquidation effective immediately. All employment is terminated. I've got a press release here. Don't intend to answer any further questions.
Although you were sort of half expecting it, are you feeling more shocked now that it's finally happened?
Wouldn't you be? 200 people have just been put out of work.
What can you do now? You got any job prospects?
Nothing. We're terminated.
For you yourself, what sort of job prospects?
Ring the bank and ask them to stop my mortgage.
Yeah, 35 years down the drain.
What are you going to do now, Rob?
I don't know. And look for a job, I suppose.
Did you ever think it was going to happen? It's been in the wings for a while.
I never thought it'd really happen. I thought common sense would prevail, and it hasn't.
What about for someone that's been around so long for as long as you have?
Oh, it's a hard thing. 35 years if you like. But you have to grin and bear it. You have to put up with, they're not government decisions, you put up with the decisions of bureaucrats. They haven't, they've made the wrong decision all around, and time will prove that they're wrong.
Well, how many years on the dailies have been?
10 off and on for me.
How are you feeling?
Shattered.
Did you really think it would finally happen?
No, never. Never thought it would happen.
And when they finally said that's it, I suppose you're just in a state of shock.
Yeah.
So is it now, clean up and go?
Yeah. Don't even know whether we'll get paid.
They haven't made any mention of redundancy?
Well, we get paid, apparently we get paid this week. We probably won't get redundancies. And within 8 weeks we probably get holiday pay. It's a long time to survive without money.
How many years have you been at this desk?
12 years.
12 years?
Yeah, 12 years.
Oh, and you're feeling fairly shattered?
Yes, yeah, a bit shocked, upset.
Did you think it would finally come to this?
No, I thought we'd, sort of go back to the west. I think everybody did. But still, that's the way it goes.
What are you going to do now?
Be a housewife, again. Rich has got 2 kids and a mortgage.
And you've got?
1 child and a house I rent. And I'm a single parent.
So after 108 years of production, WA's oldest newspaper, the Daily News, is no more.
Well, joining me now is Bob Baxt, Professor Bob Baxt. He's head of the Trade Practices Commission. Professor Baxt, welcome to the program.
Good evening, Michael.
200 jobs. What do you say to those people?
We say that we are deeply disappointed that the situation has arrived without the alternative offer that was put to the board of the Daily News being considered properly. We said that in our decision. That played a significant part in the way in which we balanced up the alternative of the creation of a monopoly or the fact that there was a serious alternative buyer who was negotiating in the context of the way in which these things are done, in the background of the knowledge that the other potential buyer would probably have been stopped because of the monopoly law.
But in making the decision that you did, you do have a discretion, and one of the bases on which you have that discretion is public benefit. Now, in this case, why isn't 200 jobs decisive in making a decision rather than the monopoly side?
Well, the onus is always on the applicant who wants to create the monopoly. After all, the law says that you cannot have one firm dominance, one firm monopoly. That's the law of the land. The onus is on the applicant to show that the public benefit arguments that are put forward should outweigh the creation of the detriments that would result if you had a monopoly. The creation of a monopoly in the context of Western Australian News being able to buy the Daily News is that this would have created significant barriers to entry for a potential new entrant. Now, we know, as a result of information put to the Commission's conference that was held here in Perth, which was attended by one of our Associate Commissioners, Professor David Round, he was here for the previous conference that was held in June of last year, that there was an alternative purchaser there, Heytesbury Holdings. Robert Holmes of Court's death, sudden tragic death, meant that we couldn't explore 1 or 2 further factors that we wished to explore with the company. We sought additional time from the applicant, Western Australian News, which of course is part owner of Daily News. They refused us that application, which would have given us another week or so to consider these matters more fully, and as a result we had to make the decision in the context of the information before us.
But
now,
Professor, if I can interrupt for a second, the Daily News and the West Australian were in the same stable before. What's different now? It was a monopoly before, and it's a monopoly again, isn't it?
Well, as a result of the Daily News closing, there is only one newspaper in the West. But the barriers to entry for a new person who wants to come in and start a newspaper are significantly reduced as a result of that situation. What had happened before and what could happen, I mean, there is nothing to stop Western Australian News from starting its own new newspaper tomorrow. What the law says, and bear in mind that we've got an obligation to administer this law because the precedent that's being created here could well be considered in other areas as well, is that by acquisition, by merger, you shall not create one firm dominance, one firm monopoly. And that has to be looked at in the context of what the law is and how we are to administer it.
But it seems illogical. In this case, by not allowing the merger to take place, the West Australian comes back to being a monopoly. What are the barriers to entry? Why can't simply another paper start up, even if the Daily News and the West Australian are back in the same stable?
Well, in our determination, we explain some of this in greater detail, but the creation of a one-firm monopoly in both the morning and afternoon newspapers, that niche that they will occupy right through the newspaper industry, will make it very difficult, as is shown in other cities throughout the world in terms of afternoon newspapers being started. Holmes à Court and his company have indicated that they wish to start an alternative newspaper. We believe that they were at a stage where they were being quite serious. That counter-offer was not considered at all. It was just treated with disdain.
Was it a serious offer?
Well, we believe that it was the first gambit in a serious offer, and indeed in today's Daily News, Mrs. Holmes à Court says that she and the company are still interested in starting up an alternative newspaper.
What if Heytesbury hadn't made the offer? What would have been your decision then?
That would have been a more difficult decision, a much more difficult decision in the context of the way in which this argument was being assessed. If there was no alternative buyer, then the question of the failing company would have been something that we would have looked at with a slightly different emphasis than the emphasis that was concentrated on in this decision.
But that means you put a lot of weight on the Heytesbury bid, don't you, which many people think it wasn't a serious offer in the first place.
Well, of course, they have to consider that in the context of the fact that they didn't do the investigation and the work that we did in relation to this matter. Remember that this is something that developed as a result of an attempt by the Western Australian News, the conglomerate there, to purchase newspapers, which was the subject of the early authorisation. We obtained an injunction in the federal court. In order to get that injunction, we had to do market work, market research in relation to the way in which the market operated and so on and so forth. That's background to the way in which we looked into this and the issues that we regard as relevant. It's set out in very much more detail in this particular decision. But there's one other very important factor. The Daily News itself is nearly $13 million in debt as of today's date on their own figures. They placed the masthead, which the Heytesbury Corporation wanted to offer $250,000 for, at zero. They'd marked it down from $4 million to zero. There was no real explanation given to the Commission as to how this debt, in less than 3 years, had risen from something under $600,000 to nearly $13 million. Those are factors that are also important in considering what the future of the newspaper was. Indeed, our real concerns was that whatever happened, there were going to be a lot of jobs lost. And even the Western Australian newspaper wasn't prepared to give more than a 2-year assurance as to the continuation of that newspaper.
Professor, that's all we have time for. Thank you.
Peter Holland with ABC News. After more than a century of reporting, Perth's Daily News has closed. Provisional liquidators were called in this afternoon after the Trade Practices Commission refused to allow the West Australian to buy back the Daily. More than 150 staff have lost their jobs.
As a result of the TPC decision, the Daily News has been placed in provisional liquidation effective immediately. All employment is terminated.
That was the grim news broken to staff this afternoon. The Daily News had been reporting for 108 years, but today the bad news was generated from within. The Trade Practices Commission had refused to let the West Australian, which once owned the news, to buy it back for $13 million. Ironically, it was a $250,000 offer from the late Robert Holmes à Court for the paper's masthead, which contributed to its wind-up. Facing an angry crowd of news journalists, the Trade Practices Commission chairman, Bob Baxt, said the Daily should have taken that bid more seriously than it had.
It is our view that that offer should have been pursued, negotiated with, in the context of the duties that face the directors of the Daily News.
He said the Commission couldn't allow the West Australian to regain a monopoly.
I think he's still not dealing with reality. I think he's taking the word of Mr. Holmes Court's representative in front of all other, and in doing so has put everyone's jobs at risk.
At the Daily News late this afternoon, 150 staff had no immediate job prospects.
There's no easy way to say it. The paper's finished.
There's a lot of people here rely on that money.
we don't get it.
The young ones with mortgages and bills and kids going to school there, they could have real problems.
Editor Jack Harrison believes the Heytesbury bid, to which the TPC attached so much weight, should now be backed up.
Quite clearly what they said has influenced the TPC quite considerably. And I think now they have an obligation to come forward and make it very clear exactly what they intend to do.
Even if other bidders now try to take over what's left of the debt-ridden daily, there won't be a paper for a while.
In a sudden and emotional end to more than a century of West Australian history, Perth's Daily News published its last edition this afternoon. At its Northbridge offices today, staff shed tears of frustration after the Trade Practices Commission banned a deal which would have saved their jobs.
Guys, very well.
Thank you.
What happens to these people now?
God knows. I mean, they go out there and they get any job they can. You've got a mortgage, you've got kids, they'll break stones in the road if they have to.
Ring the bank and ask them to stop my mortgage.
Shock, tears, anger. Staff of Perth's Daily News bidding farewell to each other and their newspaper. They just learnt the paper was to close, and it was a bitter pill to swallow.
They've made the wrong decision all round, and time will prove that they're wrong.
Earlier, they'd been venting their anger at the man they blame for putting their jobs on the line, the Trade Practices Commissioner.
We don't think it's you. I've got children and a house. What are we supposed to do?
After lengthy talks, the Commission has blocked the sale of the Daily to WA newspapers, owners of the West. The Commission argues it would create an unacceptable monopoly of Perth's newspaper industry.
You're asking us, as a Commission, to simply turn our back on the law and say, well, the law is silly.
But many industry analysts are pointing out that to destroy the West Australians' only competition creates the monopoly the Commission says it was seeking to avoid. It's now become clear that even in death, Robert Holmes-a-Court has played a crucial role in this saga. He offered to buy the Daily News name, and nothing more, for $250,000, and that could have scuttled the WA newspaper's bid.
Maybe, I'm not sure. Look,
Tim Treadgold, editor of Holmes-a-Court's Heytesbury Publishing, said this afternoon they are planning to start up a newspaper, but he said we've given no cast-iron guarantee. But the Trade Practices Commission decision means that without another buyer, the Daily must close, a part of Perth's newspaper history and 200 jobs lost.
People there with kids and mortgages and everything else, and no immediate prospects of any employment.
And out on the streets of Perth tonight, the anger wasn't confined to Daily News staff.
Get your Daily News.
Do you think you'll miss it?
Yeah, just like everything else that's closing down.
David Lawrence, National 9 News.
The anger, the emotions that met economic reality today when Perth's afternoon newspaper was closed and put into liquidation with multi-million-dollar debts. Just 2 hours ago, the paper's death decree was read to staff, 200 told they no longer had jobs.
The Daily's front page said it all, but the paper's journalists had much more to say about losing their jobs, taking their concerns to Trade Practices Commissioner Bob Baxt.
I've got children and a house. What are we supposed to do?
What I'm saying, concerns echoed by all of the paper's 200 employees. Casualties of the Commission's rejection of a $13 million rescue bid for the Daily by WA newspapers.
Acquisition of the Daily News by WA News would create a monopoly which does not otherwise exist. We've got to look at this in the context of the long-term issue of competition. That's the obligation that we have.
Professor Baxt says there's a good chance the late Robert Holmes-a-Court's Heytesbury Holdings will start a new daily newspaper within 12 months, a development the Australian Journalists Association believes unlikely.
We've heard this for years, that that's going to be the case. Even when he had a newspaper, that company did not, move into the daily market. So they've given weight to an offer that most people consider as a joke.
Even if an independent newspaper is started, it'll come too late for many at the Daily. The final blow delivered by the paper's personnel manager late this afternoon.
The Daily News has been placed in provisional liquidation effective immediately. All employment is terminated.
A bitter pill for workers like Arthur Ewan. 41 years of service down the drain.
I'm just shattered for everybody. I really am, and bitterly disappointed at the Trade Practices decision. Bitterly disappointed.
For others, similar feelings.
They've made the wrong decision all round, and time will prove that they're wrong. I've never had a paper fold under me before, so it's a new feeling. I just hope the Trade Practices Commission can sleep easy in their beds tonight, mate.
We were taking each day as it came, and this is D-Day.
The final clean-up, but files and personal effects may be all the daily staffers take with them. Liquidation means full redundancy payments are unlikely. For some, this Friday's pay may be their last.
No, I would never have thought that I'll be going home tonight saying to Cheryl, don't get me up at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Sean Murphy, 10 Evening News.
First, after more than 100 years, Perth's only afternoon paper, the Daily News, is no more. The paper closed its doors for the last time this afternoon as staff members were given the sack. It followed a decision by the Trade Practices Commission, which refused to allow a move to save the paper by the owners of the West Australian.
No one expected the Trade Practices Commission's decision, least of all the 200 staff of the Daily News. On the contrary, they were looking forward to the West Australian convincing the Commission that their best chance of survival was for the West to buy the Daily. But the Commission, despite knowing the consequences, thought the West would have too much a monopoly on the Perth newspaper industry if that happened. Angry journalists crammed one of the largest media conferences ever held in Perth to hear Commission Chairman Professor Bob Baxt.
We've got to look at this in the context of the long-term issue of competition. That's the obligation that we have.
But that was little comfort to staff.
I've got children in a house, what are we supposed to do?
Late this afternoon, the bombshell. The headline news no one wanted to hear.
The Daily News has been placed in provisional liquidation effective immediately. All employment is terminated.
Minutes later, removalists were on the scene, leaving staff to clear their desks, reeling from the shock. Some too upset to talk.
I think it came as quite a surprise to a lot of people, even though they suspected that it was inevitable in the back of their minds.
It's like sort of slashing your wrists and, you don't feel a thing. It just happened so quickly. It just happened, unbelievable.
Did you expect it this morning, realistically?
Well, no, you never expect. I mean, you always hope. You always hope that something's going to happen.
So what about for the future for everybody who's gone?
There's no future. There's no future as of now, but I mean, a lot of people go out and hopefully we'll find jobs. Hope like hell they do. Figure that, the people with families and kids.
To many, this was more than a workplace. It was family. But while the Daily News is no more, there's already speculation from inside the industry that a new afternoon newspaper could well hit the streets in the near future. If that happens, it could come from Heytesbury Holdings, the late Robert Holmes à Court's flagship company. John McCourt for 7 Nightly News.
West Australians are set to feel the effects of an extremely tough state budget due to be handed down later this month. Information obtained by 7